Our tough-on-terror president refusing to be politically correct while our national security is at stake. You heard him refer to the Manhattan truck terror suspect as an animal yesterday, threatening to throw him in Gitmo. Now, he's calling for an even tougher punishment for the slaughter of 8 deaths. This morning, tweeting, "Would love to send the NYC terrorist to Guantanamo, but statistically that process takes much longer than going through the federal system." There is also something appropriate about keeping him in the home of the horrible crime he committed. Should move fast. Death penalty. This afternoon, we heard more from President Trump on the flawed immigration program that allowed the jihadi suspect into our country.
I'm calling on Congress to immediately terminate the diversity visa lottery program. It's a disaster for our country. The people put in that lottery are not that country's finest. We know that the program presents significant vulnerabilities to our national security. We want a system ultimately that's merit-based so we can bring in people that will help our country, grow our country, and be safe for our country.
All right, so many people on the left, Greg, are saying that because the president is weighing in on these criminal proceedings, he's jeopardizing a conviction. Do you agree?
I don't know about that because this has never happened before. This is a first. And this is a guy who's not a politician for 70 years of his life, who speaks his mind, and he's got this little technology that allows him to do it. It shows that you can put the citizen in the White House, but you can't take him out of the White House. He's still a citizen, and as ill-advised as it might be, he's reflecting the frustrations and the anger of his constituents. He's acting exactly like we would. And also, the reason why he's saying this is because he views this person not as a typical criminal. He views this person as an enemy combatant.
Right.
If somebody said, "Oh, you shouldn't be saying that about Nazi war criminals," you go, "Screw that, they're Nazi war criminals." That's how he sees these guys, as enemy combatants. So the rules of comportment don't apply in this situation. He should not have to worry about what he says about an enemy combatant. It should not matter. The other thing, too, is this guy apparently, he wants an ISIS flag in his room, and I'm thinking we should give it to him, but we should dip it in bacon fat first and then put it right up there.
Okay.
That's why
probably
I don't run
not
a hospital.
Going to do that. But, right.
Why not? Who does that offend? It's an ISIS flag. I mean, I don't understand why we have these rules of comportment about certain people and things.
Okay. Provocative, Gutfeld.
But it's not. It's not provocative. It's the ISIS flag.
That's right. That's right. I just, the pork thing, maybe, who knows. Dana, the Guantanamo issue, President Trump is bringing that back up. Do you think that he's just trying to kind of flip over everything President Obama did or didn't do with Iran or Gitmo? Or...
I think he was speaking based on his instinct, which is to say, like, this guy should have to face really tough punishment. But the thing is that while that is an instinct for a citizen to believe, for a commander-in-chief, then it's more difficult because you are the chief law enforcement officer, and the Supreme Court has already ruled many, many times, especially with the Hamdi decision in 2007, which was a disappointment to the administration that we couldn't try him as an enemy combatant because he had habeas corpus rights. The court is going to give he is a legal permanent resident, so it wasn't going to fly in the court, and that's what would have taken so long. I understand the instinct, but I think that also sending him to Gitmo would make him a martyr to ISIS. I mean, better to leave him here. And New York City has a near perfect prosecution record for terrorism cases, and the evidence against this guy is so overwhelming.
And this is a death penalty situation.
I guess they have to just, yes. I think, well, if New York State. In New York State, I think, do you have the death penalty? I don't think so.
No, that's what I'm
not
saying.
in New York State. I mean, but again, I think that the president saying he should get the death penalty, that is reflecting what a lot of American citizens would feel about him. But just legally, I don't necessarily think that that will fly because of how they try him. But I think it is better for him to be tried in America. And also, he's going to be tried in America. So talking about Gitmo is useless on this particular case. I would, if he captures enemy combatants on the battlefield, take them to Gitmo. I see no problem with that. I think it's a perfectly reasonable place to put terrorists.
Juan, do you have a problem with any way that President Trump comported himself after the attack?
Well, I really have trouble with the idea that he said that our justice system is a laughingstock, a joke to the world, and I think our justice system is the envy of the world. And I mean, so You know, I was listening to Greg, and I think just like Dana said, you know, Greg's right. You know, it's just like one of us is in the White House, and somebody says, oh, you know, there's a threat to the herd, and we say, go get him, to the shepherd, go get him. We don't like that mean old wolf. And in this case, that's what Trump is behaving like. He's not behaving, as Dana said, like the commander-in-chief, like the leader of the flock, who would in some ways say, here are our rules, here's how we have survived as a nation, a constitutional-based republic for so long, is because we're a nation of laws. And we understand how despicable this character is, but guess what? We have a system that can handle it and put it in place. Instead, he derides our own justice system. It's unbelievable.
But you can't speak to the wolves. They're not listening. You have to kill the wolves.
No, but you're speaking to us as the American people. We care about what
explaining to them rules that wouldn't apply to wolves.
Even to President Trump's point, though, I think giving him the death penalty makes him a martyr. This is what he wants. He wanted to die. He wanted to die by suicide by cop, which is why he had those 2 bogus guns. He was hoping to die. He wants to be a martyr. I'm actually with Senator Lindsey Graham on this, who's a military lawyer for 33 years that thinks we should try him as an enemy combatant and send him to someplace like Gitmo. I guarantee if you polled the detainees at Gitmo, they would rather die than be there. So I think we actually give this guy what he wants. If he gets the death penalty, and I think there's an argument to be made that we are at war with ISIS. This guy is a terrorist. He took up arms with ISIS against the United States, and he's an enemy combatant and should be treated as such.
Put him in Rikers Island. I don't think.
But he's a legal permanent resident. There's a reason that we didn't bring all of those Gitmo people. Remember, President Obama wanted to bring all the Gitmo detainees to New York City for trial, and America said absolutely not, because as soon as they get here, they get habeas corpus rights, and they were not legal permanent residents, and they didn't deserve it.
Well, we've also seen people like Senator Cruz, which I fully support, in stripping the rights of U.S. citizenship from individuals that choose to join ISIS. So I think that is something, particularly in the wake of this, that Congress absolutely needs to revisit and something that we need to do as a country. These guys are not, as soon as you join ISIS, you are no longer an American, you are no longer a permanent resident of the United States, and you deserve to rot in hell.
The question then, Lisa, is how do you prove it? Because you think back, there was an interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal, the editorial this morning, defending the diversity program that President Trump is so critical of, that diversity visa program. And in the piece, the Journal editorial writers talked about how the Tsarnaev brothers, the ones who did the Boston bombing, the younger brother, they were really transitioned into ISIS followers as children. So they were here, and then they radicalized while in the U.S. Or Omar Mateen, the Orlando club bomber. He was an American-born citizen. Syed Farouk, the San Bernardino guy, U.S.-born. His wife was the immigrant. So the question is, you know, how do you revoke someone from being an American citizen? They all
pledge their allegiance to ISIS, and I think when you do that, with the legislation, my understanding of the legislation that Senator Cruz put forward, I think it's if you go and physically join ISIS.
Oh, well, that's one thing.
But I also think that it should also apply to people here in the United States. If you pledge an allegiance to ISIS, if you take up arms against the United States in the name of ISIS, as evidenced by what this guy shouted when he got out of the car, we know by the note that he left, he is a member of ISIS. That is what drove him to do that. That and his radical extremist ideology, then you should no longer be considered a United States citizen.
Well,
I guarantee most Americans agree with me on this.
And I don't believe the president was saying the entire U.S. justice system is a laughingstock. I think he was referring to the lack of speed with which criminals can get prosecuted because they can drag everything out on appeal. Now, let's listen to what Sessions said, the Attorney General, about this. Go.
Terrorists should know this. This administration will use all lawful tools at our disposal, including prosecution in Article III courts or at Guantanamo Bay. If anyone has any doubt about it, they can ask the more than 500 criminals whom the Department of Justice has convicted of terrorism-related offenses since 9/11. And they can ask the dozens of enemy combatants at Guantanamo.
So, Gutfeld, what would you do with this guy?
Well, first of all, just about the diversity visa, one is correct, is that is not going to stop the people that are already here. But diversity without merit is Russian roulette. So we have to change it for the future. It may not have worked now in the past. What I would do is, the piece of information here, he's married with 3 kids. Mm-hmm. So here's a fiend with a family. And I said this before yesterday, and Terry Shepard has brought this up, and people are, he's not really a lone wolf if you've got family. So if the family's, if you say your family is going to suffer, we're sending your family back. if you do this, that directly affects the community in which these suspects, the people that you have suspicion on, live. And it forces family members to say, well, what he is doing is directly affecting our lives. So if people know, maybe if a person knows that their family is at risk, then they might not do it, or maybe the family might act on it.
So here's the thing, though. In fact, what I read was that the wife was taken away today from their Paterson, New Jersey home with the kids, with the luggage and everything. We don't know what happened, but she was interviewed first by the FBI. And apparently, according to the reports, said that she knew nothing of this.
They never do.
Well, I don't know, but I'm just saying what the report was. So now I'm listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, you know, in our tradition, we don't say that the sins of the father should be visited on the child. And when you have a situation like that, I think it was Jason Chaffetz who said to us yesterday, in Israel, this is what happens. If you have this problem, you know, they raise the Palestinian house and the family, right? But we don't do that. We don't say if somebody committed a terrible crime here in the United States.
This is different. This is war. This is not a crime anymore. This is actually war, which is different than just a crime where we take a criminal's family. That would be absurd. We would not do that to an armed robber, take his family. But this is war. And in war, you have to change the rules. And the rules here is nothing's really working in preventing these things, except, like, we don't know if something's being prevented because it's behind the scenes. In this case, a tool which is targeting the family and saying, this family, we're not hurting the family, but you're leaving. You're all going. That's something new.
It's a deterrent.
It's a deterrent, and it could work, you know?
How much did this guy really care for his family? He was willing to die the other day when he came out with fake weapons. Who knows? Trump got into a lot of trouble when he said, you know, you have to go after the family members, you have to go after the wives. Now it looks like, you know, that might be in play, legally or otherwise.
Well, I don't know how in play. I mean, is there legislation that's going to be introduced, or are there executive orders?
I mean, in play because at every moment, it turns out the wife had no idea. The brother had no idea. The father had no idea. He was a great guy.
I do think when it comes to, I do think to the women, when it comes to especially the women and how they are treated by these men, that it's possible she had no idea. She might have had no rights, might not have had ability to do anything or know anything or to work. The one thing that I think is very curious, and we're going to get to this in the B block, is just how many people in the community had actually seen him practicing this for a couple of weeks. That's a really
That's the point. So if they know that there is some kind of consequence, maybe a community member would see something and say something.
Novel idea.